Alright, so we're here to talk about buying and selling businesses. So the things we're going to cover just quickly is, first of all, why you need a strategy in relation to the whole area. We're going to talk about the pre-sale issues, so what you need to do, and that's actually going to take up a fair bit of what we're talking about here rather than the other things. The actual sales steps, I want to step you through what's actually involved in selling a business literally from step to step. And then we're going to briefly have a look at the other side, on the purchaser side. So we're going to talk about what the things that the purchaser needs to do to get themselves ready for the process, and also what those purchase steps are actually involve. So the first thing is really before the whole process starts, you need to ask yourself the question, are you actually going to get the opportunity to sell your business? Because there was a Commonwealth Bank study that talked about that looked into this whole issue, and what really came out of that is that most businesses are shut down or given away. And just from my own experience, even with medium-sized businesses, a lot of them are effectively shut down in the sense they're sold for very close to net assets. So really, the thing that triggers a lot of business sales is not the owner coming in and thinking, okay, I need to plan to sell my business. They're usually forced into the process. So it's either sickness, disability, age, retirement. And what happens in the context of death is that it's often left in the hands of inexperienced family members who really haven't been brought into the business and been sort of grown accustomed to the issues that they need to face. And all that means is that the hard energy that you've been putting in to build your business up is really lost at the last minute. And what the survey also said is that even in the context of people who are investing more money and more capital and profits back into their business, still hadn't thought about what their exit strategy was. The takeaway from this is that really from the moment you walk into your business, you need to think about how you're making yourself redundant, or how you're assisting your clients become redundant in their business. Because if they haven't done that, they're actually not going to be in a position when they come to you in 5 or 10 years' time and say they want to sell to have anything of real value. And the obvious ways to do that is I want to bring in professional managers, to take on a business partner, to move family members out. And I say that in the context of if the family members aren't likely to have the money to buy you out or to buy the client out, then having them in there is not going to be helpful. In fact, we've got a client at the moment where their spouse is involved quite heavily in the account side of things, and it's a real sticker to actually getting the business ready for sale and ultimately putting the business on the market. And then another obvious one is to develop key employees. So really the first thing is what is your exit strategy? And I think on the other side of that is that if the saying goes, if your business isn't growing, it's dying. Nobody wants to buy a dying business. So if you're serious about one day being able to sell your business, or you're actually in the throes of thinking about putting your business on the market, you also need to have a growth strategy. And I think this is where a lot of advisors let their clients down. There's a lot of talk about succession planning and exit planning, all that sort of stuff. But when was the last time either you as an advisor or if you're a business owner, your advisor came and said, what's the growth strategy here? There's two types of growth strategy, as far as I understand it. There's organic, and then there's acquisition. And we're all involved in organic growth strategies. So that's marketing, effectively. If you're producing products, it's research and development. It might be service innovation. But the other element of growth that people overlook and really don't take the time to invest in is that of acquisitions. I know a lot of larger businesses, they might have a department where they are looking at acquisitions, but for the SME sector, the acquisitions department, the growth strategy partner, really should be their advisors. And that's their bankers and their accountants and perhaps to a lesser extent their lawyers. So it really is the flip side to talking about the succession. When you talk about succession planning with your clients, you should also be saying, well, what's our growth strategy? Because that really does tie in with the exit strategy. So I'm going to use a case study to illustrate some of the issues that I'm going through here, and I'm going to pick on a logistics company because we've been involved in the sale of a couple of these ones. And so the proprietor here is Malcolm, and so he's sort of around that age where he's starting to think about what his strategy is for getting out of the business. He holds shares in a holding company that owns some plant. It's also got some accumulated profits in there, so he's used those profits to buy some plant that's used back in the business. That company is the trustee of a family trust, and the family trust owns all the shares in the trading entity, which is a company. And the family trust also has a direct interest in the business premises, the depot in Sydney from which the business is run. He's got a key manager in there that's not related to him, James, who's a younger guy. And James doesn't have a lot of money, but he's got a young family. But one of his mates who didn't go into business, who went into something like accounting or finance, has got some money, and he's interested in taking an interest in the business. So we've got him there as well. Just a little bit of history. The business was started back in 1984, conveniently enough, by Malcolm's father. And Malcolm and John, his brother, bought in 1997. So they took out the father. And then in 2000, Malcolm bought his brother out. So this is quite a sort of a familiar scenario, maybe for some of you. And then in 2000, Malcolm actually got to the position where he could start to buy the depot off his parents, and that's when he brought that into the family trust. So we're going to use that fact scenario just to tease out a few of the issues around buying and selling businesses. So Malcolm's objectives are pretty straightforward. He wants us to sell his business. But before embarking on this process, I like to go through clients a little bit of sort of put them in the picture as to what's going to happen. And I was discussing this issue with a friend who runs quite a successful property development and sales business in Australia. And he said, well, the only experience that I've had with buying and selling businesses was when he was in the UK before he came back to Australia. And he had a rent roll business in northeast London. And he said, I was coming back to Australia, so I had a business partner and we put the business on the market. And he was describing the process to me, and he said, we had a couple of local agents who were within our area, and they were interested. And then we had one agent who was in a different area who sort of thought it would be a good bolt-on to sort of expand into the market. So we went through a process and due diligence, and they came and looked at everything. And then his business partner came back from a break and went to Paris for the weekend and announced that he wanted to buy the business. And so they went through various bits and pieces, and so I said, what ended up happening? And he said, well, my business partner did buy me out, but he wanted a bargain. But because we'd gone through the process, I said to him, look, we've gone through this process, so the market's the market, you're going to have to pay that. So, okay, that's good. And then he said, I agreed to get paid in 3 instalments. So they've got the first instalment, that was fine. The second instalment, I actually had to get lawyers involved because I wasn't in the country anymore. And then finally, after we'd gone through that, the argy-bargy actually paid the 3rd instalment early. I said, okay, that's a good outcome. But then he said that the one takeaway from being involved in that process was how emotional it was and how distracted we became in relation to selling the business and the decisions that I made under pressure and the impacts that it had on the relationship with my business partner, who he didn't speak to for about 5 years after leaving. They're now back in touch. So the takeaway is it's never simple, and it's rarely as straightforward and as sort of exciting as people first think. And I think that the distraction element is really important. So setting yourself up prior to going into the process so that when the process is on, you can get it through quickly is really important. The other one's deal fixation. Once you start this process, particularly once you go into the formal steps, you're going to want to finish it. And that's both sides, both the seller and the buyer get to a point where they've invested so much in the process, they want to do a deal. And it's at that stage where you need to rely on your advisors to be that calm influence from the outside to say, hang on, let's do this properly, let's slow down, or whatever it might be. So given that this is going to be an emotional, it's going to be a tiring process, it's a good idea to get business fit or deal fit. So get your mindset ready for the process. And that might mean going on a holiday before you embark on it. And having that advisor team ready to tell you when to walk away from a deal, whether you're buying or selling, and when to give something away, when to be practical, rather than holding out for a particular number or whatever it might be. So in relation to Malcolm, we need to ask, why is he selling? Is he ready for retirement, or does he just need a holiday? A lot of people start a sales process and they get sort of into it and they sort of slow down or whatever, It's because they actually weren't answering the problem of wanting to sell their business. They're just tired. They just needed a break. Now, Malcolm if we assume that he hasn't had a break for 4 years. Of course he's going to be thinking, he was going to walk in one morning, he's going to go, I just want to get out of here. I want to sell my business. And then you get into it and he actually really doesn't want to sell his business. So that's when I say, let's do a quick reality check. And also I say to people, before we embark on this process, I want you to write down why you want to get out. And I'm going to sit here while you do it. And it only has to be a couple of lines so that when we're in the middle of this process, you can refer back to that and we can keep going. Have you recently had a long break? Do you want to be relieved of the responsibility? Think about what it's going to be like when this isn't your responsibility. This isn't your baby anymore. Have you got other things to do? Usually people don't have any hobbies by this stage. Have you considered other options? Becoming a silent partner, getting professional manager in, grooming some employees to take over? Is it the right time to sell, both in the terms of the market that you're going to sell into, but also for you professionally and personally? Is the family on board? Are the kids going to be disappointed that you've cut off their expectations of coming into the business? And that can be as young as 12. I was 12 when my dad actually shut down his business. And until I was 12, I'd gone to the factory with him most weekends. I was really upset. I won't cry on you. Are you going to get the highest price selling now as opposed to later on? And what analysis have you done about how much money you're going to need from this process? And that's something we'll come back to. Finally, are you emotionally ready to sell? So there's two parts I'm going to go through here. There's the pre-sale considerations and then the sales steps. And they're about, the pre-sale considerations are actually a little bit longer than the sales steps. So if you came here from a very technical walk through the sales steps, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. But I think that you can't actually embark on the process until you've actually gone through these pre-sale considerations. And there's lots of things to think about. So what do you have to sell?